All right, welcome everybody to the October meeting of the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council. And I'm calling this meeting to order, and please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I think we have a flag somewhere on a screen. If not, well, there we go. All right, join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thanks. Just a couple little announcements. So we've turned off the question and answer chat. So if when public comments open, please raise your hand on Zoom, and we'll promote you to speak. And if at any time it looks like the meeting has been hacked, then we'll shut it down, and we'll have to reschedule for a future date. But hopefully it hasn't happened yet. So, and I'd also, just for those of you who may be joining us for the first time, members of the public, thank you for coming. Thank you to the community organizations, the press, the committee members, for your participation and engagement in this meeting and your dedication to the community. For those of you who are with us for the first time, the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council serves the communities of Eldridge, Glen Ellen, and Kenwood. As the most local arm of county government, we represent people who live and work outside of incorporated cities like Sonoma or Santa Rosa. We are, in a sense, a country town council. Like other advisory councils in Sonoma County, we were established by the Board of Supervisors to act as a two-way communication channel. The MAC serves as our community voice at county government, as a means for us to learn about and access county services and resources, and as a place to identify challenges and opportunities and innovate solutions in partnership with our supervisor. Our bylaws limit us to issues concerning transportation, health and human safety, community projects, and emergency preparedness. Others can be added at the request of our supervisor. There are no limitations on subject matter during the public comment section at the beginning of the meeting, which will be coming up in just a couple minutes. And in that spirit, I'd like to do my own comment to celebrate the rain that we just got and recite a poem that I wrote many years ago at first rain in the early 90s, October. And it's about Lake Suttonfield, and it goes like this. First rain strikes the Heron Blue Lake. Water meets itself with a million tiny hands. Applause. Short and sweet, just like the rain is sweet.
Very nice.
All right.
Thank you, Arthur.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think we're all breathing a sigh of relief, and I just had to celebrate that in some small way. All right. Oh, now we need to take a roll call. So we have a new vice chair, Vicki Handren. And Vicki, would you take roll call for us?
I'd be happy to. So Chair Dawson, you're present.
Here.
Councilmember Doss.
Present.
Councilmember Eagles.
Here.
Councilmember Newhouser.
Here.
Councilmember Dickey.
Here.
Councilmember Nardo Morgan.
Any others?
Councilmember Cooper. And Councilmember Oldroyd. Here.
All right, and welcome everybody. All right. Are there any amendments or corrections to the September minutes? Okay, could I have a motion to approve the September minutes?
So moved.
All right, I have that was two, so can we call that a first and a second? So all in favor of approving the September minutes, say aye and or raise your hand. Anyone opposed? All right, the September minutes are approved. And now we're going to move on into public comment. So as I mentioned, the public can comment on any items that do not appear on the agenda. We have not received any written public comment. I think Hannah can correct me if I'm wrong on that. So if anyone from the public would like to speak, please raise your hand on Zoom. And we'll put a limit of 2 minutes on public comments. And then at the end of all the public comments, we'll give the council members a chance to comment and respond.
And looking at our attendees, I see no raised hands at this time.
Okay, so that was quick. Welcome, Councilmember Morgan.
Sorry, I'm having a hard time connecting on the internet. Thank you.
So I'd like to welcome our new council member, Susan Oldroyd, and I'll just tell you a tiny bit about her, and then I'd let her maybe fill you in a little more about her interest of serving on the Municipal Advisory Council. But she's an accomplished architect. She served on the Design Commission in the city of Sonoma a number of years ago, and kind of left public engagement for a little while to pursue her career, but now is coming back into that. And she's also served as a child advocate for, what's it called? Basically a court advocate for children in the courts, which is a pretty amazing position. I've known one other person who's done that. So, so welcome, Councilmember Oldroyd. And do you want to tell us a little bit, if you want to add anything to that, and then just tell us about what you're interested in serving in the MAC.
Thank you, Arthur. I'm an architect, as he said, but I also have a specialty in access. I'm a certified access specialist. So a lot of my work that I do is for the state, and I review facilities for handicapped access. Anyway, I've been in Kenwood. This is my second house. So I've been in the village for more than 20 years. And I care about parking. I'm next to some very successful wineries that the parking test is spill over. And other than that, I have an interest in all the issues that this committee covers.
All right, thanks, Councilmember Oldroyd. Anyone have any council members have any questions or response for Councilmember Oldroyd? Or any members of the public have anything that they'd like to ask or comment on? Yeah, Councilmember Handren.
I'd just like to say welcome. It's nice to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, likewise.
Absolutely welcome.
Thank you.
And seeing no raised hands amongst our attendees.
So I should just mention we had one other applicant actually just about a week or two ago, and we're all full at this point. So it's Nikki, probably gonna say her last name wrong, Altieri, I think. And so I told her, well, it might be 11 months before anything opens up. And she said, that's fine. She'll just keep her in mind. So so I'm really happy that this is drawing enough attention that we're getting people applying for positions. That's really good. And thank you, Susan, for stepping forward and filling the one that Melissa vacated so she could serve on the Kenwood Press. All right, now is the time for an update from Supervisor Gorin. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you, everybody. I'm so delighted to be with you virtually tonight, and I am working remotely. We took a couple days of R&R up at Lake Tahoe. Thus, the fall coloring behind me, gorgeous aspen peak color for aspen trees. And as you received some gusty winds and rains, we received snow. So we had about a couple of inches of snow, which is pretty much all sublimated off, but we're expecting some more rain. Yay, thank you, Arthur, for a beautiful poem. I think I'm gonna remember that lovely imagery that you created of the little tiny hands reaching down to the water. I love that. So we are all breathing a sigh of relief that we are experiencing some rain I wish the rain would extend to Southern California. I think there's still some fires burning in Southern California, but the moisture in Northern California is desperately needed and very much welcome to put out all the little smokes that still linger from the Dixie Fire and the Caldor Fire. And just to bring you up to date, I did participate in the board meeting yesterday. We covered 3 major topics. One was, and I hope you have a chance to look at it on the Sonoma Water website. The climate adaptation plan for Sonoma Water, for our water supply, sanitation systems, and all of the other services they provide, have been in progress for about 5 or 6 years. And like so many other projects, they keep getting put on the back burner as we're dealing with fires and a few other things, creating a sense of real urgency to look at deeply the climate adaptation plan. So even go on and look at the executive summary to think about how all of those adaptation strategies are being implemented as we speak. Certainly aquifer recharge. A lot of the actions happen along the main stem of the Russian River. And of course, they're really experiencing drought in the Alexander Valley and Mendocino. It's a work of art. It is just an impressive document. And hopefully you'll have some time to go on and look at it because it's very relevant to who we are and what we do in Sonoma Valley. It's not just about the Russian River. It certainly is about all of us living in the valley. So the second item was a report on vegetation management grants out of the PG&E funding, settlement funds. And the first round of grants, they really captured and talked a little bit about the CEQA work that needed to be done in order to move forward on some of the vegetation management grants. And they set the stage for the next round of vegetation management grants early next year. They will be developing some criteria so that those who are involved in fire safe councils and neighborhoods can think more deeply about what kind of projects they might apply for funding to cover. And there will be a public workshop probably in January so that we can get some more information to all of you out there in the community so that we can take advantage of some of the PG&E funding for seriously needed vegetation management. I suggested that where I'm so grateful for the PG&E funds, one-time funds. Certainly we have some grants coming in from the state and federal government, and we now have a vegetation management coordinator at the Ag and Open Space. Kim Batchelder has worked with the district for a number of years, and he's hit the ground running, and he's busy putting all kinds of information on the website for us to access. There were 2 major points, I think, in our discussion. One, of course, our current drought situation overlays the need for vegetation management and augments it. And often that Venn diagram in the middle would look at projects that satisfy both a preparation for wildfire as well as drought and resilience. So what we're experiencing could be for the future. We're delighted for the rain this year, but we could have another drought year. And the second part of that is what was I going to say? How do we look at vegetation management? What is the best science behind this? And we have some experts right here on our screen that might be able to certainly help out with that criteria regarding science. Mark and the Sonoma Ecology Center, certainly. Arthur has been very involved in the forest initiatives. So I would ask you to think about what kind of projects should we be funding with our scarce resource dollars? What is the best science? Is it forest thinning? Is it vegetation management along the roads? Is it defensible space and home hardening? There are lots of different options, and maybe it's all of the above, but I suggested that we do a longitudinal study of some of the grants that produce prescribed grazing, prescribed burning, to see what the landscape looks like in 3 to 5 years. Is that the best way to use our funds to prepare ourselves for future fires? And there is no doubt we will have future fires. Yay, we didn't have one this year. We're so grateful, but other areas certainly did. And finally, there was a report, in-depth report on COVID-19, bringing us up to speed on all of the things, all of the graphs of who has been vaccinated. We're doing a much better job of reaching out into our diverse community and encouraging them to access vaccines. Thank you to the North Sonoma Valley MAC for co-hosting vaccination clinics at the Madrone Apartments, I believe, and maybe testing. And as you've been reading, we're going to be able to access booster shots. There are about 27,000 residents in Sonoma County that may qualify for the booster shots. I will self-identify, I'm one of them. So I'm paying attention to when the booster shots will be offered, either by my medical provider or at some of the same places that we established vaccine distribution sites at Lulu Center and maybe the Madrone Apartments again. So we are a whirling dervish. We're having, there's still about 20,000 people in the county who have not accessed vaccines. And that means we have not reached the 80% mark that would really allow us to take away or alleviate some of the mandated masking and other requirements that we have been working with, suffering under, enjoying. But the good news is our health officer is signing an amendment to the health order, allowing small groups of folks, if everyone is vaccinated and it is a sheltered group, in other words, the public is not invited in, then you can feel better about taking off your masks. A lot of folks have been asking for this. So if proof of vaccination is required in gyms, everybody's vaccinated, then you can take off your mask. And we're probably not going to be out there enforcing that or doing inspections, but I think everyone will have some comfort level about participating in an environment, a closed environment with others who are not wearing masks because we know that they have been vaccinated. Next week, I want to let you know the board will have a couple of items. One is a report and a discussion on Project Home Key funding. This is round 2 of the state funding for communities, counties, and cities to apply for grant funding to perhaps purchase hotels, motels, set up shelters or permanent supportive housing. And Petaluma is interested in applying, Roner Park, the river area with Georges Highway, Healdsburg, Santa Rosa, and the Homeless Action Sonoma is applying for a grant under Project Home Key. They may or may not be ready to access the funding, we'll see. They've also applied for safe parking in the on the land that they are in escrow with along the Sonoma Highway. They will be presenting information to the Springs MAC, I believe next week, next Tuesday. I want to get that right. I think it's next Tuesday at the Springs MAC. But I've asked Hannah to work with Arthur about making a presentation from their perspective on what it is that they're proposing. They need to do some community outreach. So also to just end my comments, I am hosting a virtual town hall next week, October 27th, I believe at 5:30 to 5 to 6:30 on homeless in Sonoma Valley. Who are we seeing that are camping on our trails in the Montini Preserve? Who are we seeing camping out in their cars And certainly the Sonoma Ecology Center will be part of that because they're part of the creek cleanups and the managers of the Montini Preserve. But we also will be having discussions from SOS, Kathy King, Annie Filates from Homeless Action, and a number of other groups with perspectives about the services being delivered and the need for expanded services in the Valley. So I hope you sign up and participate with that. Dr. BJ Bischoff will be hosting and facilitating that. It will be very well run. And it will be simultaneously translated into Spanish during the virtual town hall as well. In my final comment, a long-awaited public meeting regarding the alternatives of the Sonoma Developmental Center have been tentatively scheduled for Saturday, November 6th. They're moving it to Saturday, November 13th, we hope. And so we will be getting the word out for the public meeting, virtual public meeting of those alternatives. So I know this is something that all of you individually and as a group are very interested in, and we will be inviting you, the North Sonoma Valley MAC, the Springs MAC, and the Sonoma Valley CAC to a joint meeting to discuss the alternatives. I'm calling it jokingly a three-ring circus. And so, Arthur, we're going to be depending on you to rein in those rascally council members.
Good luck in Glen Ellen, I'll tell you.
And it's going to be a long meeting, obviously. And I suspect how we will be moving forward is having comments from the North Sonoma Valley MAC first. The Springs MAC, they have been less involved in this, and then the Sonoma Valley CAC can capture all of your comments and make their own advisory comments to the planning staff at Permit Sonoma. And I believe that's going to be November 17th, maybe 16th or 17th. And I'll let Hannah or Arthur correct that date, but it is a Wednesday night. So come, and it will be virtual. So bring your little snacks. It's going to be a long evening, I suspect. So that's my report for today. Lots happening.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Any comments or questions from council members? Yeah, Councilmember Doss.
Thank you, Supervisor Gorin. A question in regards to the indoor mask. I was asked by a friend of mine, a fellow member of the Kenwood Community Church. And the question is, do churches fall into that category? We have about half of our members are coming to in-person but we all wear masks during the meetings. Would we fall into that category where we would no longer need to wear masks during this church service?
And I would love to say yes. I know that there have been special arrangements for churches because it's a very sensitive topic. There are some religions that really do not believe in vaccinations and masking. And the governor has made special guidances for churches. I would recommend that your church do, first of all, get you some information about churches, what the guidance would be for churches. And secondly, I don't know whether you're asking for proof of vaccination or COVID tests. If you are, then you can feel good and open it up without masks. I think that should be an incentive for everybody to access vaccinations.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Thank you, Supervisor Gorin. Can I clarify a few things around the STC? I know the dates are still being maybe confirmed to some extent, but the public meeting, I believe you said, was probably going to be Saturday, November 13th. Is the assumption that the plan alternatives would be out a week, several days before that? Any update on that?
And that's a good question. They were scheduled to be released November 1st, and that may be pushed back a few days because the public meeting has been pushed back. So it may be that they'll be released November 1st. And when that happens, we will send a note to all of you through the chair, Arthur, or have Hannah send you a link to the alternatives on the website.
Great. So presumably there'll be a little time in there, which would be
No, we're
No.
going to surprise you.
great. I just want to make sure we're like, we can look at them. I'm sure that's the intention. And the other question, the Wednesday night would be the three participant or three MAC event. Is that intentionally to be on the same night as the North Sonoma Valley MAC meeting? Because I think that would be if it was on the Wednesday. Would that would be the
Yes.
intention? Okay, just to
Yeah,
clarify.
we decided to do that. Yeah.
Okay, good. I wasn't sure. Okay, thank you for that.
And also of note, the Springs MAC has had their meetings on the fourth Tuesday, which is difficult for me after a long board day. So we convinced them to change their meeting. And so what they will be doing, I think, holding the meeting next Tuesday, participating in the joint meeting on November 17th, and then changing their meeting to the first Wednesday, I believe, of the month. So Hannah can clarify that when those dates are. And I know some of you do sort of participate in that, or at least review what it is that they're talking about.
All right. Thank you, Supervisor Gorin. Any other comments or questions from council members? Yeah, Councilmember Newhouser.
Susan, you mentioned the climate adaptation document. Is this something that's posted on the county website?
I think it's on Sonoma Water's website. This is an adaptation plan for Sonoma Water. I think it's on the website. It certainly is in the board agenda that you can access online. It's lengthy, 460 pages. And so sit down. It will probably be, I love your little coworker there, Mark. It'll probably be great reading for those insomniacs. But a lot of good information, really deep.
And you also mentioned a document for emergency preparation, fire preparation. You refer to it as vegetation management.
Vegetation management. It was just a report yesterday about vegetation management. Again, the information is on the county website along with a PowerPoint presentation for the board meeting yesterday.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions or comments from the council? Any questions or comments for Supervisor Gorin from the public? Raise your hand and Hannah will put you on.
I'll just give folks a few minutes to raise their hand. Not seeing any at this time. And still not seeing any.
Okay, well, let's move on. So it's my great pleasure to introduce.
And thank you all. I'm going to say goodnight to you. I actually want to have some dinner with that guy that I'm taking a few days off with. And Hannah will report if you have any questions, and we'll try to get you the information that you need. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor, and we appreciate you being here.
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you.
All right, well, it's my great pleasure to now introduce the next topic on the agenda, which is a report from the presentation by the Sonoma Ecology Center. And I see Steve Lee and Erica Warren, and I have Tony Passantino on my list, but I don't see him yet. But so they're going to fill us in on some of the work that they've been doing in the watershed, and then we'll have some time for questions and comments after that. So take it away, Ecology Center.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mhm.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I see a thumbs up. Okay. So thanks for having us. And I'm going to be giving you a little bit of just letting everybody know about some things that we're doing in the realms of creek restoration and stewardship that we thought that the MAC would be interested in. And so definitely some of the things I heard, the words about climate adaptation, definitely a lot of the things we're discussing here sort of could be considered as going down that approach a little bit. So anyway, I wanted to start by just giving, I mean, I know I have several people in here that know exactly what I'm talking about already, but maybe some don't. So I'm just going to give a little short primer of some watershed issues that we're facing in Sonoma Creek watershed. And so this is the watershed map of the Sonoma Creek here. And you can see the upper part of the watershed is here. It's circled in yellow. The headwaters being up here in the Sugarloaf area, coming down through the Kenwood Valley. And then after Kenwood, it kind of goes through the Warm Springs Canyon area and then on down through the town of Glen Ellen, SDC, and on down from there with all the tributaries coming in. For those who don't know, the history of this watershed is that there used to be a lot more of these alluvial fan areas that would be occurring in here at the bottom of tributaries before where they meet the river. And so this is places where all of that eroded sediment from stream canyons kind of accumulates at the bottom of those canyon areas. And it's all this very coarse sands and cobble and gravels that accumulate. And that's what you see, for example, out of the Adobe Canyon in Kenwood. I have a better map of this in a minute here. So this, for example, is the Kenwood area, and this would be Sonoma Creek coming out of the headwaters and through Adobe Canyon. And you can see all of these distributary channels right here were places where the creek maybe would have meandered at different places in its history before it was eventually solidified in its position by people and their activities, causing it to stay there. But what would happen is the coarse materials would build up in place, and then the flood would come and it'd move over to a different location. So that's really what the Kenwood area is for a lot of you folks that maybe know the Kenwood area or live there and have, you know, your wells there. You know that the groundwater levels are all relatively shallow there. That's because all of that water coming out of that canyon, going into that coarse alluvium, it goes down into the subsurface there and moves along down through the Kenwood Valley before it hits and where the Sonoma Creek is and wraps down into Warm Springs Canyon. And by the way, there used to all be on the other side of the valley, these extensive wetlands that were in that area. Anybody that has homes in there would know that maybe if you live in these sort of areas, you have clay soils that don't drain very well. People that would live up in the Highway 12 area up there have gravelly soils that drain really well. This is why that's the case. So all that water that goes out of the Adobe Canyon into that aquifer there eventually hits, you know, impervious substrates as you get down toward the canyon there, but towards Morton's, and that's where it starts coming out of the groundwater, and that's what feeds this section of creek, and that's why that section of creek has remained perennial flow even when lots of the other parts of the watershed dry up, and that's why we still have steelhead in this part of the watershed, and that gets us to. And that's why we're talking about it, because we're trying to do things to improve conditions for steelhead and other species in the creek, among other things. But what's happened in our watershed is a typical watershed when you have a lot of, like, let's say that a rain event came. This is a hydrograph through months, but if you can envision this being for a moment being just a single rain event, you see a rain peak that generally forms, and usually it's some period of time after the rain really starts getting heavy that you start seeing flow in the creeks. And then after the rain period would end, then it would usually trail off, kind of like what you see here, trail off for a long period of time after the rain ends. What happens in Sonoma Creek, and it seems to be increasing, is we get these rain events and almost immediately the creek starts rising. And the creek rises to these really, really steep flood peaks. And then almost as soon as after the big rain event stops, for anybody that lives along the creek knows this, the creek almost immediately starts dropping off again. And this is one such rain event that happens, you know, for example, in January. This is a typified hydrograph, and this is one for one of the USGS gauges in Agua Caliente showing rain events that happened in 2020. And you can see how steep they are, and then they drop off almost immediately. So what happens in our creek is instead of the water coming down and having these wet, rainy seasons like we used to get a lot, where there was all these misty days and continually sort of low rainfall, when the rain comes all at once, which is happening more and more these days with climate change happening the way it is. The rain comes all at once down the creeks like that, and it just causes this intense erosion in the creek channels. And so you have, historical conditions in a creek, and you have, the creek, and you have nearby floodplains and wetlands. And over time, with land use changes, vineyard development, and so forth, the creeks kind of get constrained. And then when you get all of this really flashy runoff, it causes the creek channel to widen and steepen, so that the banks get really steep and incised, and it also causes the bottom of the creek channel to drop. And that's what's been happening in the Sonoma Creek watershed for a long time. And it's not a new thing. Like this picture from back in the 50s or something shows, what can happen when you get that incision that occurs along where homes are parked right up there against the banks. And this is an example here where you can see that the stream bed used to be here when this tree was growing originally, and this creek bed has physically dropped by the height of this person here. And so the bottoms of the creeks are getting further down, and that's also because the creeks are places where you have the groundwater tables visible, right? Creeks are the places where groundwater levels of the shallow groundwater are visible. When you have the creek bottom dropping, it further allows the groundwater to drop further down to that level as the creek as they drain out. So this is all part of the water and groundwater conditions that we're experiencing. And so what we're trying to do is, figure out how to get that scenario back to some sort of restored condition. And so a few years ago, we got money from the Fish and Wildlife, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, to do a study looking at the upper 9.5 miles of Sonoma Creek from, say, SDC up Madrone Road up to Adobe Canyon, and look for opportunities where we could do restoration actions that would improve steelhead habitat and slow water down and improve water quality and reduce bank erosion and improve riparian habitat. And so that's what we're talking about today. And so I'm not going to go really deep into any of this stuff. This is just to show you that we started this with a public survey, trying to understand what people's concerns were among people who live near creeks. And as you can see, a lot of people are concerned about bank erosion and flooding, and some people are interested in habitat for steelhead too. And then we went about a process of identifying places that started with some desktop analysis that I'm not going to go into, but that just know that we did a lot of that kind of stuff, studying the creek patterns, and then following that up with walks of the entire creek stretch between Kenwood and Glen Ellen to check sites and verify things that we discovered. And we looked for opportunities to do these sorts of things, to find places where there would be opportunities, like right where there wasn't houses right up against the bank, for example, that were already there, to look for places where we could widen the corridor from what it was. And this would be an example of a restoration project happened elsewhere that was an example of that and what it looked like in the time shortly after restoration, before trees and everything built back up. Another option is to look for opportunities to lower the inset floodplain. Again, because the creek bottom is dropped in so many places, there are places where there was floodplain habitat in the greater creek corridor that because the creek is dropped, it no longer can have access to even during high flood. So like, for example, in the developmental center, there's a lot of habitat that's old floodplain habitat that the creek doesn't really have access to anymore. So figuring out ways to lower those things down with excavation, and which in something that would look like this, where it was higher right here, and give the creek more room to spread out and slow down. Restoring seasonal wetlands is another option that we'd be looking for, fish passage barriers. So all of these sorts of restoration actions are what we are trying to look for. And in the end, through 6 reaches that we identified between, again, Madrone Road and Adobe Canyon Road, or Adobe Canyon, we identified 20 separate sites where we could visualize and do projects like this. And then we went through another round of landowner outreach to get landowners on board and to do some further studies of those. And in the end, in this project, we ended up identifying 16 projects that we took to 30% conceptual design planning, which is kind of one of those things you need to do to start getting funding for things like this. All of this stuff is available. If you just go to our website or search Google for Sonoma Ecology Center Restoration Vision, you'll find this document. And so I'm just going to go through a little bit of that. This is, for example, one site that we have in that list was there right by Mound Avenue, Kenilworth, right by the Kenwood Depot. There's a little park over there called Alder Park. For if anybody doesn't know that exists over there, it's owned by Regional Parks. And it's just a couple open fields that aren't developed. And so this is an example of something that could be done, and not to get into this particular thing, but just to show you that this is an example of our 30% design kind of stage, where we envisioned the kinds of things that could be done there, provided cross-sectional, profiles that this is what we would remove. This is where the new slope would be, large woody debris and additions, things like that. So we envisioned these sorts of things all around the watershed, among those 16, all around the upper Sonoma Creek. And we settled on one project to be taken to 65% design to use as a demonstration project, where we would try to get funding to actually pull this off. And so what we settled on there with landowner support was in the Morton site. If anybody has been in Morton's, there's that large picnic table area in the back there that hardly is in use anymore. And the current owners don't really have an interest in rebuilding the place up to use it so much like it used to be done in the old days. And so all of that leveled off area that was placed fill to widen and level that place out sometime in the 40s or 50s. The idea is to remove all of that fill and return the area back. And once this is all done, this sort of area here would again look something like this, to widen it out, slope back the banks, and give the creek more room to meander. I didn't mention, by the way, that there's erosion on the other side of the creek, that if you did actions like this, this is the kind of thing that slows water down and it reduces the erosion potential on the other side of the creek. So we ended up pursuing this project as a demonstration, and we ended up going for additional sources of funding, and through a grant with EPA to permit Sonoma, and another grant with CDFW we got the planning money to finish the plans, to get all of the regulatory permits, and to implement this project. And this is all underway, starting right now, and this is going to be happening over the course of the next 3-4 years or so, 2 to 3 years from now, I guess. So that's one such project. And then here's just another round of showing, some of the next highest projects on our priority. There's all of that excess sediment that builds up in the creek up there at the Hoff Road area, right below the bridge at Highway 12. That's one site. And for example, there's the bridge built up with all of that accumulated sediment because it doesn't have a room to spread out anymore. It just accumulates in that channel. Farmers used to go in there and dredge that out with bulldozers, but they're not allowed to do that anymore. And so it just builds up. So the idea is to take this excess sediment and take it out of here and then relocate it further down in the canyon, where the area where the water has scoured the creek down to bedrock. Because all this stuff here could provide really good spawning gravels for the steelhead down there, where there's plenty of water, but not very good spawning gravels. And so this is something that's a big regulatory hurdle to get over, but we're getting momentum with regulatory agencies to pull this thing off. And we're in the proposal stage for a grant from the State Water Board to do that project. And then we have another, we have big dreams about the Kenwood Marsh that's still there in the vicinity of Deerfield, to work with the remaining landowners over there to try to restore the marsh. We already have a $50,000 award from Fish and Wildlife Service to begin some of the study on that. If you know where the Rossi Ranch is, at the intersection of Lawndale Road and Warm Springs Road, there's a project in there. There's sites all around where Mountain Vista Farms is, where there's some opportunities in there. There's the Sonoma Valley Regional Park across from the Jack London Village. There's some opportunities there. And also we have the Sonoma Developmental Center areas and places at Trestle Glen a little further down from there, where there's some things to be done. And so we actually applied for a separate source of funding a year or so ago from the State Water Board under their 319H fund program that is concerned about sediment in the creeks. And we were able to receive an award for a couple $100,000 for them to try to move 6 of these projects to further planning, further stages of planning down through the pipeline. And so this is just an example of Kenwood Marsh. And here's the Sonoma Developmental Center. This is an example of a part of the property where there's this really high erosion because sewer pipes that were here have a lot broken away and caused this vertical 20-foot high or more, 25-foot high erosion area. So there's all these opportunities there. And so I know everybody's interested in the Sonoma Developmental Center. So this is an example of our restoration vision for that. This is that furthest downstream part before you get to the little neighborhood there. That's where that erosion is. There's a tributary, Hill Creek, that comes in right there, that comes in as a really incised T into the creek. And we'd like to see that spread out further on both areas and where that Lux building is and so forth. This is kind of a place that we really could stand setting the banks back, where these are these vertical banks and doing some things. And so, and there's another, here's another part of the property. This is where the Sonoma Ecology Center is. We would like to restore ourselves out of a home and take all of that old floodplain habitat down there and bring it back down to so the creek has access to it. So the goal here is to show you not all of the details here, but just to say that this is what we're trying to push for. And for example, in the developmental center planning process, trying to make sure that the planners there understand these things so that when they're envisioning and revisioning development in this, they kind of stay out of the areas that we're identifying as the most critical places where we could work with the creek and give the creek the room it needs to spread out and meander. I'm just going to real briefly, I don't want to take up everybody's time. We also have lots of other things we do at the Ecology Center. We have a Streamflow Stewardship program with a series with these red dots of streamflow gauges and regular monitoring sites. Here's some of the data. I'm not going to get into it there. But we're doing a lot of this work. The idea with gauging at this level of detail is to find signals of things like where people are pumping water out of the creek and so forth. And we can see some of that in our data. And then the goal here is to work with landowners that need to use creek water as a source of water for whatever it is they're doing, and find ways to work with them cooperatively and provide support to them to find alternative means of doing that. And that means helping them change water rights so that they can pump water out of the creek if they're going to do that earlier in the season when there's lots of water, not late in the season when the steelhead needed the most. Help them do the planning to put in water storage tanks so that they can draw off that water late in the dry season. So we have a funding from the Wildlife Conservation Board to do just that sort of thing. We have one project, the Rossi Ranch, where we're doing just that. We're looking for another landowner that currently could use and benefit from this service. We also have, as part of that funding, another project up on the Gibb Ranch in Kenwood, where one of the horse pasture sites up there is a place where one of these old alluvial fans exists, and the creek is channelized and the water just rushes straight to the creek during those winter storms. We're working with that family to try to find ways to reshape the area there so that the water is allowed to spread out and soak into the very permeable sediment that's in that area, rather than rushing straight to the creek during the wintertime, contributing to those flood peaks. And then we also have a big push that we're trying to do to try to convince people that we should be doing more to take off more of that flood peak and provide better water security by storing rainwater where we have options to do so. This is my own project at my own house that I pursued this on my own. I installed 60,000 gallons of rainwater harvesting storage at my house. And last year, even though we had that second worst rainfall on record, I filled that entire system. And just last night's rain, we got 2,700 gallons from just last night. So like if you have space to do this sort of thing, it doesn't work in small little residential lots so much where you don't have really room for this, but this is things that can be a real benefit to people's water security and also help with a little bit incrementally with this flood issue. So this is something we're actively pursuing and try to get people on board with. And with that, I'd like to hand over the mic to colleague Erica Warren, who's going to take it from here. And I think she's going to try to share her screen. So we're going to try it that way first. You're muted, just so you know.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. Steve, I'm always impressed by the breadth and depth of what your project does. It's really super neat. Here we are. We have, I'm going to present. Let's see if this happens. Everybody see that? Oops. Can everybody see my screen? Thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. Got it. Thanks, Arthur. All right. So the CREEK program has been a program that was in response to community noticing, community need, identification of a need for the breadth and depth of trash that's out there. And it's been pretty significant. And anecdotally, we've seen an increase in 2022 regionally. And I haven't dove into TPW's data, but there's data out there that might even support that. We have been responding to people, and we got kind of activated by Susan Gorin's office to go and address a couple hot spots that have been identified. So primarily Igvella Bridge and Maxwell Park have been identified as some of the biggest, hottest needs, but the needs are throughout Sonoma Creek. And they're different and varied. For example, we just recently did an event in Glen Ellen as part of Coastal Cleanup Day and pulled out a giant hot water heater that had been disposed of and sitting in the bottom of the creek. So, and there's all sorts of different needs for trash cleanup in our streams, and here we go. So that program is all about cleanups and development, and I've somehow outsmarted myself. Here we are. We've piloted 4 cleanups at identified hotspots, and then done a coastal cleanup in partnership with that effort across 4 sites simultaneously with identified community leaders as our partners. In total, we've removed over 9,195 pounds of trash, and we're continuing to do so. So we've done this through partnerships with youth, with partnerships from the community, such as Rotary groups and groups that identified and put their hand up at the very last minute and said, I'll go help the supervisor or other representatives like the interim city manager for Sonoma to address these hotspots. So actually one hotspot is so hot that we had to address it 3 times. So that's Igvella Bridge, formerly the Riverside Bridge. And we went to the west and then the east. And then we actually had to go back and do the west again. And that was June, July, and August that we did those 3 sites. Sorry, April, June, and August that we did those 3 sites. In addition to that, the coastal cleanup sites, we pulled out over 5,000 pounds of trash between 3 sites. We did Jack London with the awesome group of teens. We had an awesome group. We're helping the coast by cleaning inland. Glen Ellen surprised and surpassed anyone by doing it in addition in the roadway. So it's like going upstream to clean our coastal ways. So kudos there. We did Agua Caliente and pulled a bunch of trash out there, over 1,900 pounds. And then at Larson Park, we hit 250 or something like that. I can pull the data. I think it actually was 3,000 pounds out of Larson Park, which was astonishing and was representative of like historic abandoned encampments and a bunch of metal scrap and things that have floated downstream. There were a couple abandoned couches that made their way there as well. So we were able to pull that up in partnership with regional parks, with community members and people that just identified that they love their park and they want to make a contribution. This effort has been made possible by a bunch of partners, not only Susan Gorin's office through TIF grant, but also with partnerships for TPW who defray cost and waive our tipping fees for this huge amount of trash. And each time is mileage, but also this tipping fee that adds up and racks up the costs. Regional parks have been total sweethearts and donated grabbers to make the process safer and buckets to make it easier and more sustainable with fewer trash bags necessary. And then the gloves to protect people's lives and livelihoods. And in addition to that, we've been fortunate to work with the city of Sonoma, the MAX, leadership throughout District 1, Sonoma Overnight Services, because this is the nexus of human and social services at our creeks, kind of out of sight, as well as Glen Ellen Forum, our regional Rotary clubs, and upcoming a partnership with Santa Rosa Junior College for an upcoming cleaning at Leveroni Bridge. So here's just the fabulous crew in action. We've also identified, I am blowing time, forgive me. we've identified that this is a need, and not only do people want to come and clean the work, but they also want to give us a huge shout out for where the trash is in Sonoma Creek and its tributaries. So we've created a reporting tool that is in development and will be released as a part of this program. And that will help us not only identify needs and be able to plan for them before an event, but also to be thorough throughout the watershed. And then finally, this program has legs, and hopefully it will swim upstream and be able to serve throughout the region. And we hope to build out an Adopt a Bridge program that will enroll people and allow people to identify and kind of befriend their local creek and tend to it. So we have more informed and trained people. These trainings would include site identification, so not only trash, but also issues of erosion and undercutting, the presence of invasive species colonization, and then also be able to identify if there's new intersections between creek and community issues. So how to communicate with, or to tend to, or to resource, or how not to the unsheltered community, as well as issues of public health, as well as how to use the reporting tool, how to collect data and observations. And then the other things that are a part of this program are community cleanups and stewardship events to address these issues, and partnerships with agencies, community organizations. And a huge shout out to everybody that makes this possible, including our partners that integrate with this and the donors that make it super strong program. So I just want to give a huge shout out and thank you. This is a small representation of the magic that makes this program happen.
All right, well, thank you, Erica. I take it that's it for the Ecology Center official presentation. Really amazing work, you guys. It's been a while since I was at the Ecology Center, and a lot has happened since, and it's just it's really heartening to see how much you guys are doing on so many different levels. So thank you for all that. Anybody have any questions or comments for either Steve or Erica? Yeah, Councilmember Doss.
How does the Adopt a Bridge program work?
Yeah, so the Adopt a Bridge program is sort of the future vision of these treatments. So instead of being so reactionary, the idea is to work with people such as yourselves who are like, oh, I saw this thing down the way, and I'm going to go add it to this this reporting tool. And then in addition to that, I might follow up with Creek at SonomaEcologyCenter.org, which is the email for the program. And I might say, hey, I'm free this coming weekend, or I'm free in the future. And then we would schedule an event and make the whole thing happen. In addition to that, to not be so reactive, we would train people how to be stewards and teach them on the policies and procedures so that we can safely engage with anybody in the creek corridor, and then be informed and not in that we just want to inform everybody about every single thing that is going on so that we can have the most informed, most egalitarian, wonderful people that are stewarding our creeks and looking out for the health of Sonoma Creek and its tributaries.
Could I just interject a little bit there, which is just to say that, we've tried this before at the Ecology Center many, many times, probably back when Angela was there, probably when Arthur was there. It's hard to keep a program like this going. It takes funding to keep people around. And when you try to fold this into our restoration program, or maybe our education, have this be a side thing of what one of these groups does, it's just really hard to keep this to sustain a program like this. So that's just one piece of it. And so the way that it's going to work, getting back to council members' question, is it's actually going to take some ownership of people that are in the community to do some of this stuff on their own as well. And that's the whole concept with the Adopt a Bridge, just like with an Adopt a Road. People just take ownership of certain areas, and they keep an eye after what's happening and let us know, and we help support them in getting stuff out that they're willing to take out on their own time. rather than it always having to be us organizing like a community event every time you see like one little small accumulation.
And this model, if I may continue, this model is underfunded. It has been given seed money through TIF, which we're super grateful for, but it needs the legs to help it swim upstream, or the fins, so to speak. And then on top of that, this example of a community-led effort has worked really well in other sites that we tend, and examples of that are like the Montini Preserve, where people who already walk on Montini care about it, report back. Oftentimes they're doing the labor themselves, they're identifying needs, they're reimbursed, but they order equipment to make Montini go. And the same is true for Sonoma Overlook Trail and places like that. And so I'm happy to dive in more for how the program will work, but it really does need resources to make it happen. And it needs that community that already cares and already notices to activate that last little inch, which is communicating and showing up.
I've lived here a little over 40 years, and along Sonoma Creek, as it enters next to and up next to Warm Springs Road, the tremendous change in the creek path and the sidings of the creek along that area. I can see where work needs to be done, but if it was adopted, if the community got involved and there were a half a dozen or more people who wanted to do something, who oversees it to make sure they're doing the right thing and not something making it worse rather than better?
Yeah, again, that's just one of those things. Which we've been really nice at the Ecology Center is having Erica here to be with one point person on all this, rather than having a whole bunch of people trying to like do it as part of all of the other things they're trying to do. Maybe you're getting the sense, but what's true is that we're all trying to, it's like herding cats doing all the things we're trying to do at the Ecology Center. And we have a lot of, there's a lot to do. And so it really is nice having one person. That's what we really are trying to do, is build a program where we can sustain and keep a person on the payroll like Erica to do this, but it's just tough. And so we're trying the best we can.
Got you, thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Thanks, you guys. Those were both fascinating presentations. I had no idea about the restoration projects and really appreciate you going through that, Steve. Eric, I have a quick question for you. Just to contextualize that 9,000 odd pounds of trash that you found, was that presumably an annual, or has this not been done in a while, so it might represent several years worth of trash? I'm just trying to get a sense of where that number fits in, to how much to expect in the creeks every year.
Yeah, great question. And I may actually lean back on Steve or Arthur or anybody else that has experience with this, but I'm expecting that to be a little bit of deferred maintenance on account of COVID and the fact that we didn't run so many programs. But again, I will cede the floor unless I think of something.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that there's a difference between picking up paper cups, and there's a difference between getting out things like hot water heaters. We tend to, when we do these kinds of community events, hand out the little grabby grabs, and let people go with their little bag and pick up the paper cups. And that's really and then there's a lot of the effort that's put into sorting it, and how many cigarette butts did you pick up? And a lot of that, we end up having to pass by a lot of stuff that we just can't get in during events like that. And so that's why we do have this deferred accumulation of larger stuff, like old hot water heaters that date back to the early 1900s, when there were those old, that's where people threw all their stuff, car engines and all that stuff. So that stuff always gets missed in these. So definitely we spent a little bit more time in this effort getting out some of that legacy stuff. Yep. So that hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Newhouser.
I just want to thank both Eric and Steve for their presentations. It's great to see these projects come to fruition after so many years of just trying to get funding to do the planning, even the initial planning. So it's great that you were able to secure additional funding to finalize plans and move forward with projects. So hats off. That's wonderful news, and everything we can do to increase the floodplain is needed for everyone, especially given climate change and adaptation. Just regarding the creek cleanups, having done that over almost 20 years, what we found was that unfortunately probably 90% of the trash was associated with homeless encampments. So this is why these issues are so tied to social and economic concerns as well. And so until these issues are really resolved, we're going to continue to have disproportionate impacts to our natural environment, and particular streams. People love to camp out next to streams. So yeah, so good luck with that. And I know that you guys are working on that too, through your renamed Sustainable Sonoma effort. But thank you again, and it's great to see the progress that you're making.
Thanks for your kind words, Mark. It means a lot. And then on top of that, I do want to say that this, I am quoting a wise man here, Stephen Lee, who said that this is essentially the lifting of all boats. It's a really heavy load, and Mark is right. I've talked to Alistair. I'm not going to hazard a guess at his last name right this moment, from City of Santa Rosa, who does even more of these at larger scale. And he's said exactly what you've said, which is over 95% of the trash that they see brought down to the streams is brought by people who are unsheltered and experiencing homelessness. So yes, absolutely. And so these issues are tied and intertwined. And unfortunately, I couldn't read my notes while I was presenting, which was total goof on my side. But I do want to just give honor to the fact that we partner with the regional leaders who are dealing with homelessness and who are taking that huge lift on their shoulders. And so we directly conference with SOS services, Sonoma overnight services, and we've made contact with other people who are serving and seeking to serve the homeless population here in Sonoma Valley.
All right, thanks, Erica. Any other questions or comments from the council before we go on to the public? Yeah, Councilmember Morgan.
Well, thank you both, Erica and Steve. Really impressive presentations. They were great. Thanks so much for being part of our community. And Steve, I am so thrilled that you're part of this restoration plan, and that it is not just a piecemeal plan. I think that the fact that it's stretching from Adobe Canyon to SDC makes it so much more effective as a restoration plan. I do have a question, and you might not be able to answer it. I'm not sure if this is just in the planning or ideation stage, but these are really big projects. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of crews to do this. How are you planning to implement it? Will you contract out, or is this something that the Ecology Center will just do completely alone? Are you in collaboration with other organizations to make this happen?
Yes, absolutely, to all of the above. What we're modeling this program after is, if anybody's heard of what happened with in Napa at the Rutherford Reach, there was a large effort there pursued by and saw that was sort of an organic thing, that the individual landowners that were there that were facing all of these issues of creek erosion reached out to the people like RCDs and the ecology centers, the environmental types. And the whole thing was, instead of it being like a, hey, I want to do this thing, I'm going to fight against this with the regulatory agencies and fight all the way and have to deal with the permitting, all that stuff. It became a cooperative thing where everybody recognizes the need. The regulatory agencies and the environmental groups and the consultants and the landowners all work together. And that's what makes this whole thing work, is taking that larger approach and not doing it piecemeal. And that way you can get permitting, which is like gigantic part of this cost. You know, literally $1 million of planning and permitting to do $200,000 worth of work. Like, as horrible as that sounds, that's the way this works. So if you're going to have to go through that for every single little tiny thing, it's not going to work. And so you try to get a whole bunch of things tied together so that one permit is for a whole bunch of these different projects that are all part of the same thing. And that's the way that this will find success. So our project at Morton's is a demonstration. So it's all kind of standalone and it's all very expensive. But the goal is to show proof of concept and to get the momentum going so that we can get that kind of large efficiency of getting everything tied together done. To answer the last part of your question, no, we definitely are working with groups like Environmental Science Associates, Pernunsky Chatham, the planning consultancy groups that are doing this kind of thing. And you know, that it's a partnership among those people that provide special services like engineering, and then us who deal with the landowner outreach and some of the monitoring and some of the vegetation. It's a partnership for sure.
Awesome, great. Nice to know. Collaboration is the key to the future.
Yep.
All right, thanks, everybody. Any last chance for questions or comments from the council? All right, let's move on to public comments and questions. Hannah, if anybody have their hand up to ask a question or make a comment?
And let's just give our attendees a few moments. If you'd like to raise your hand in the Zoom app to make a public comment. And seeing no hands.
Wow, public is being very quiet today. What's going on? They're out enjoying the rain. Okay, then I think we can move on to our next topic, which I was excited to hear about. It's those of you who maybe haven't looked at this. So there's this project called El Camino De Los Altares 2021. Excuse my Spanish. And so it's a project that's highlighting locally publicly available local altars that will be on display for the Day of the Dead celebration, which if I remember right, that's like December 1st or 2nd. I always forget which one. It's, I think in Mexico it's in the at night, but anyway, early November will be public altars, and local organizations throughout the valley, including the Springs MAC, are participating. So we've been invited to participate if we want to. Each altar will have a point on a map that is being created with its location, time, days of the exhibition, QR code, so people can virtually check in. And for anybody who doesn't know about the Day of the Dead altars, they're, you know, they can be in honor of almost anything, but often they're in honor of people who have passed on. So it's, you know, sometimes personal objects, there's artwork, there's, you know, maybe not candles considering the potential fire danger, but so just beautiful altars. There's been a Day of the Dead altars at the Mountain Cemetery in Sonoma. I'm not sure if there probably wasn't one last year, but anyway, there are some local observances. If anybody hasn't seen those, you can probably find some examples online, but it's a very moving and very beautiful tradition. It comes from Mexico originally. So I'll open up the discussion in a minute, but here's a couple final things. So if we want to get involved, here's some options. We could partner with the organization to create an altar or highlight existing altars in the MAC area. We could have an ad hoc, and we've only got a couple of weeks here, so would be very short ad hoc, but we could have an ad hoc explore that. We could contribute a raffle prize. And if we do require some funds, Susan Gorin has pre-approved funds up to $100 that would get a funding request at our next meeting. So that's the basic idea. When I started thinking about it, I started, you know, there's many ways to run this, and to be totally transparent, I don't have the time to help organize this, but I would love to see it happen. And I would be willing to maybe the day of the event, you know, spend a few hours, you know, if there's need for people to be at some of the altars, just to keep an eye on things. Anyway, with that, I'll open this up and see what people think. Yeah, Councilmember Morgan.
So Arthur, is this virtual only, or is it in a live altar?
Well, I believe it's a live altar. Maybe Hannah can illuminate that for us. I mean, my picture of it originally was that it was live.
Well, Well, I
Like
was
the
going to tell everyone that last year, I don't know if any of you know who Jim Shear is. I know you know him, Arthur. But he actually did a Day of the Dead ceremony on the Jack London Village decks by his office, and it was quite beautiful. And people brought all kinds of things, and we might be able to collaborate with him. And I have access to the I can use those decks because I work there, so that we're allowed to do that. That might be a possibility if that's a spot.
That'd be a great spot. Yeah. Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Can I clarify something, Arthur and team? I believe you mentioned December 1st. Isn't it November 1st?
November 1st.
Okay, okay.
I
So
might
we have
have
a short.
misspoke. Yeah,
Okay, so we have a short.
yeah.
Maybe I misunderstood too.
Yeah,
We
we
have
only
a
have
short window.
like
Just
less than 2
confirming.
weeks actually. So
Yeah.
it's,
Okay.
yeah, very short.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've thought of a number of places. I mean, I like that, like your idea, Angela. I've also thought it'd be really cool if there was a way to set up some altars on the downtown Glen Ellen Bridge that people could drive by and see. And in that case, we probably need somebody to be there just to keep an eye on things and maybe just put them up for a few hours, on that day. But that would be something people could sort of run across, randomly as they're driving and see it. And there's a few other places I thought of too, but I'm curious, Angela, would you be interested in if we formed an ad hoc committee and just had a couple people?
I'm having some surgery on the 26th, so I might not be up for it.
Okay. Oh, come on.
But I would otherwise, because I really do love it. I'm just not sure I'll be able to do a lot at that point. But I'll help in any way I can if I can.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think, we can form an ad hoc, or we could just offer to, whatever other organizations might be planning to do something up in our area, which I haven't heard specifically if there's a plan for any altars in the MAC area, in our MAC area. Yeah, Councilmember Handren.
So I can reach out to people at Artiscape. I know that they, on Highway 12 in Boy Springs, I know that they do altars in their studio space, and they have been involved in public altars as well. So I can reach out to them and see if they would be interested in collaborating or working with us on that.
Okay.
And through the chair, may I jump in quickly?
Yeah.
I believe Artiscape is collaborating with the Springs Max, so it might be a way to have the Max and collaborate together. So that's something to consider as well.
So perhaps they'd be willing to display some of their altars up in this area, if that doesn't step on the Springs Mac toes too much. I also thought another good spot could be the parking lot by the Garden Court Cafe, if it was okayed with the owner, and then people could just, if there are no cars there, people could wander around. It'd be visible from the road, which I think could be a good thing to attract people in who maybe hadn't heard about it or hadn't even thought about it. Like I said, I'm just throwing these ideas that I really don't have time to help organize, but I'm just throwing out some ideas. Yeah, Councilmember Morgan.
I could also talk to BJ Blanchard, who is a local Glen Ellen artist, and she might be able to help us put something together. And would we be willing to collaborate with the forum? Because I noticed that Lori Pyle is here. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Lori, but she's part of the projects committee, and maybe they might collaborate with us to create something together. I don't know if we want to do that or can do that. I think Lori's also.
That sounds great. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if we have to, maybe Hannah can answer this. I don't know if we have to actually formally create an ad hoc. I think if there's a few people on the MAC that are interested, they could just contact the people that, at the forum and Artiscape and see what develops. Does that sound right, Hannah? Because it's not going to last more than a couple of weeks anyway, right?
Yeah, and or if it was the case that an existing ad hoc wanted to take this on as a project, that would be functional too.
Mm-hmm.
Just to clarify, as long as there's not a quorum amongst the people who are participating.
Well, it sounds like Councilmember Handren and Councilmember Morgan have a couple things they're willing to do for this. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
And maybe Lori in the audience, do you want to chime in and let us know what you think about getting the forum involved?
I'm seeing the raised hand. Just give me one moment.
Okay.
All right, and Lori, you should now be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now.
I can hear you. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah,
Lori.
I think it's a wonderful idea to have a Day of the Dead altar someplace. And as chair of the projects committee of the Glen Ellen Forum, I would be happy to work with my team and other members of the community to make that happen someplace. But I think it needs to be a decision that more than, I think the team needs to make a decision as to where and when, and then we can take it from there, set it up. The forum, I guess the news could get out through the forum about if people wanted to come and place things at the altar of loved ones passed. It can be worked out. What do you think, Angela?
I think so. I think you're the lady to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have a projects committee meeting this Friday, and not everyone can come to it, but I will bring it up there. But before we have the meeting, I will send it out in an email to the members of the team. How's that?
Sounds great.
Okay.
So I don't know if we need, Hannah, do we need to vote whether the MAC supports this, or can we just let things take their course from here?
I think you're just giving direction. I mean, to be safe, I'm actually not certain.
Okay.
So.
Do I have a motion that the MAC would like to support the Dia de los Muertos altar project? We'll call it the El Camino de los Altares.
Second, and clarify that would be support in terms of development of the project and in terms of potential funding, right, of up to 100?
Yeah, there's $100 available, and we support the efforts of our council members Handren and Morgan to work with the community to make this happen. So all in favor, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
All right, looks unanimous. All right, great. I look forward to it. Look forward to hearing where this all happens and participating.
And through the chair, may I just jump in to clarify?
Yeah.
So I will get in touch with council members Handren and Narda Morgan tomorrow by email and connect you with the project organizers so we can get all that ironed out. And thank you.
Great. All right. All right. So now we're moving on to reports and announcements from council members and ad hocs. So the first one I have on here is the Citizens Advisory Council, and Council Member Dickey is our man on the council, on that council.
Evening, everybody.
Hey, Matt.
So last meeting, we heard a project on Woodside Court. Kate, you know where Woodside Court is. It's off of Madrone Road. It's a residential project. We don't normally hear small scale residential projects, but because they wanted to encroach into the setback for the adjacent creek, we wanted to hear it. There were concerns expressed about, their encroachment plans, the what we call BFE, which is base flood elevation, and the determination as to whether or not the house and the project would actually be above base flood elevation. We eventually supported the project with the understanding that a part of the project would be re-examined for how closely it encroached into the 100-foot creek setback. Originally, these houses, a lot of the houses that we see were developed prior to the expanded nature of creekside setbacks. So this one met all the criteria for when it was constructed, but it does not meet the current criteria. So their expansion was kind of questionable in my view. And then the second thing that we did, which was very interesting, is that the state of California some years ago wanted every municipality and county in the state to develop a groundwater management plan. And there are a number of scheduled requirements for meeting the plan. The Sonoma Valley has been meeting its goals. So we heard a presentation from the people that are managing this particular groundwater sustainability plan, chiefly from Marcus Trotta, who's the chief hydrologist for GSA. It was really, really interesting. And of course, rather than going into great detail, amongst the things that I questioned him about was water recycling. And, you know, our local sewer district is at the end of 8th Street. So having water recycled and then pumped all the way back up the valley, even as far as maybe the golf course, for instance, is incredibly expensive because you have to dig up every street imaginable between the end of 8th Street and Boys Boulevard. And it occurred to me while I was talking to this gentleman that maybe when SDC is developed, the question should be whether or not that water that would come into the sewers shouldn't be treated right there rather than pumped all the way down to the valley and then lost forever. Because after all, we don't really know what water is going to look like 20 years from now. And it could very well be that we are now experiencing normal rainfall at 20 inches per year. And so every drop of water that we can recycle for whatever purpose is going to be pretty important, whether we put it back in the creeks after its tertiary treatment is complete, or we use it for any other purpose, the ball fields that may be at SDC, for instance. So I bring that up because it dovetails with a comment that I made at our last meeting, which is that I would like to see SDC developed with some foresight rather than reacting to current, housing issues and current fire issues and all the rest. I would like them to plan for the future. And this water management, this groundwater management plan, and all the water requirements that we are now increasingly pressurizing these systems with, I think should be addressed. And it should be addressed when we examine SDC as a plan. It's like, okay, all this water is going to go through these antiquated pipes all the way down to the 8th Street, and then what? It's going to be pumped up here and then it's going to leave. And it seems foolishness to me. And so there you go. There's the Citizens Advisory Commission update.
All right. Thank you, Councilmember Dickey. I think we wait till the end of everybody's report and then we have a chance for comments. So the next one on my list is the Glen Ellen Forum, and Amanda Schoen, who's the president, is that correct? Apologize, I don't have her title handy, but anyway, she sent me, she couldn't make it tonight, but she sent me a little thing to read as an update on the forum. And she has, there's 3 items. One is the Dunbar Point cleanup, which is a corner of Dunbar and Arnold Drive. In the process of obtaining authorizations from the county and Caltrans to improve areas in those easements and rights of way. Interior lot tractor mowing and weed whacking has been done, more to be planned before additional work to grind or remove stumps. Planning to remove non-native plants, trees, solidified dumped dirt, lot debris, and other material. Item number 2, the Jim Birkeland Bridge lighting is on hold at the moment. Our community representative had to step down. We are seeking someone to help finalize this project so we can have holiday and/or permanent lighting in the future. If anyone is interested in leading this project, please reach out to me. And I'll put this in the chat. Amanda Schoen, actually, I think, yeah, I don't know if Hannah got this email. Anyway, Amanda Schoen, president of the Glen Ellen Forum. There it is. And then number 3 is Fire Department Triangle Cleanup, Mark Newhauser, awaiting next steps from Ariel. We are closer to a plan and probably require an on-site meeting. No new prospects for ballot box location. Ideas welcome. And that triangle could be another spot for Day of the Dead altars. It wouldn't be a bad spot either. Okay, so that's the forum. Anybody who's active with the forum have anything they think should be added to that? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Next one is the Communications Ad Hoc, which is myself and Council Member Handren. And we had a table at the Glen Ellen Fair a couple weeks ago, and it was a really successful time talking to people we knew and people we didn't know about the MAC and what we do and what their concerns are, which no real big surprises there, but it's good just to keep in touch with the community that way. And we had a raffle. We raffled off 4 red emergency backpacks with supplies and stuff. So that was fun to see people get those things, and they walked away quite happy with their with the rewards of our government largesse. I'll put it that way. And we also took down some names of people who just had thoughts on issues, and so we'll follow up with them as the time goes on. And and the one other thing we had was a flyer about the proposed community bikeway from Madrone up to downtown Glen Ellen, and people like that idea. So I was hoping that was going to be on the agenda tonight, and then I was going to tell people to come to public comment, but it's been pushed off to another month. So we'll reconnect with those folks. Councilmember Handren, anything to add?
No, I think you've covered it. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, next up is the Preparedness Ad Hoc. And thank you, by the way, Mark, for sending in the couple paragraphs about what you guys have been up to over the past year.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I don't really have a prepared statement other than what I've already submitted. No progress to report currently, although I'm not really sure what the composition of our ad hoc committee will be. And so I kind of, if it does change, which I thought it was, if Damon is stepping down, is that still happening?
No, I'm completing my term. I was a 2-year term, and so I'll be on until the end of this term.
Oh, okay, excellent. Okay, I wasn't sure. I was a little confused in our last meeting because it sounded like there was going to be a change, and I wasn't really sure. But that's good news, so I appreciate that. And so we just need to meet. We need to have a follow-up meeting to decide what our next steps are. We're still waiting to hopefully get some comments back on from the reviewers of our grant proposals to find out what we can do to improve upon the proposal so that we can resubmit at a future date in the next round.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Newhauser. And maybe at the end of the check-in here, I think it might be good to hear from Hannah, just because I'm aware that ad hocs are not supposed to be in place for more than a year, really, and then they become a standing committee. So we may want to just have a short discussion about how to proceed. I'm not sure. I can't remember when the ad hocs were set up. I don't think it was the first month or two, but probably by the end of this year, we're coming up to the 1-year anniversary of our ad hocs. Or do you want to comment right now, Hannah? on that?
Yeah, I'll make note to check in with Ariel as to when those were formed, and then I'll provide an update with some next steps at our next meeting.
Okay, thanks. So we probably will be pivoting a little bit. You know, I don't want to see anything that we've already started get, you know, stalled out by this. So we'll have to strategize how we can, you know, keep going and also abide by the Brown Act. Okay, and then the traffic and safety ad hoc.
We have no formal report at this evening. I think it's the onus is on us to sort of regroup and determine next steps, with the caveat that Hannah's going to check on you know, sort of the future of the ad hocs in terms of timing. Unless Angela or Jed, do you have anything to add at this point? No, it looks like not.
Okay, I think we're, all right,
No.
thank you, Councilmember Eagles. Councilmember Cooper, did you?
No, I just slowed to my button. No, I don't have.
Okay.
I escaped.
Okay, and then the Eldridge SDC ad hoc.
We don't have any prepared statement either.
Okay,
So I do have questions that we could consider for items for a future agenda related to our discussion points.
yeah, that sounds good. Okay, we'll get to that in a few minutes.
Are there, can I make one comment? Just one comment. I do think we're still going to have someone talk bike path, which is one of our focus areas for traffic and safety. Is that still true moving forward, or is that to be rescheduled at a future date?
Yeah,
to be determined.
First, I forget exactly what happened. I think Steve Arrett from Regional Parks was unable to attend tonight, and there may have been some other reason, but anyway, they couldn't be here. The bike path folks from the county couldn't be here, so we decided to put our bikeway discussion off, because I think it'd be really good for them to hear, you know, the community's thoughts about the bikeway, which is not on an official roster yet for bikeways. So we want to like to make as big of an impression as we can when that happens. So I'm inclined to wait until they show up, and then we can, you know, push the idea.
Got it.
with the
Sounds
right
good. So
people.
that'll be pushed past November, because we probably have an SDC
Yeah, right.
meeting then, and so
Yeah.
to be determined. Thank you for that
Yeah,
clarification.
it'll be a little ways
Yeah.
down the road. Okay, does anybody else have any anything to report that is relevant to the MAC or the community? Yeah, Councilmember Newhouser.
Yeah, I just wanted to weigh in on the what we call the Firehouse Triangle project. So there was a communication from Ariel and the county and Transportation and Public Works regarding the project, and apparently they are actually support the design, the little restoration project there, with the caveat that they maintain a lane for the ballot box. But there's a lot of questions that came up they had made specific comments on the design that we submitted. And I say we as my partnering with the projects committee and with Lori and company. And but after talking with Amanda Schoen about the project, realized that we need to have a follow-up meeting with TPW to discuss some of the details. And I had put in a request to Ariel, and Hannah, you might want to make a note of this, that because I am still waiting for a response from Ariel on a follow-up, our request for a follow-up meeting with TPW, or to actually have a site meeting is what I think would be most appropriate. And also that we would follow up on finding an alternative site for the ballot box, because it's not really the most ideal place to put a ballot box on that little triangle there that's encircled by roads. And I put in a call today to the manager of the Jack London Village to see if they would be open to putting a ballot box there. This was an issue, as you may recall, and the rest of the MAC may recall, that Ariel put a request out for ideas on where to locate a box. The firehouse has said they would continue to host the ballot box until, at the most July of 2022. And at which time they want to have it removed because they consider it a hazard to have it there. And no other site in town panned out. So it's one of those issues where we want to have a ballot box in this town, but all of the publicly owned lands and sites, and even the post office, which is privately owned, is not one that the county supports. So anyway, I know it's kind of a long drawn out description of these issues, but we are moving forward, and the Glen Ellen Forum is real excited about doing this firehouse triangle project, because it was one of the first projects that was identified as an issue when the Glen Ellen Forum formed. So anyway, and regarding the lights on the Birkeland Bridge, it's another issue that I have put in a request to Susan's office for their leadership, because it's a very complex issue dealing with not just the county right of way, but also with negotiating with the state, which owns the adjacent land, and with STC and its current upheaval. They're not even willing to discuss or consider an option of providing access or an easement for electricity. So it's a complex issue that volunteers with a local organization are just, it's too overwhelming. And so I'm really hoping that that our work through the MAC and with Susan's support and Ariel's leadership to help find a solution to that, because it is a very popular service, providing the holiday lighting on the Birkeland Bridge. So I just want to put that out there, that this is something I'm doing and helping with in my liaison with the forum to help move forward those two projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Newhouser. Any other announcements from council members? And then we'll move on to public questions and responses. All right. Okay, Hannah, I'd like to invite the public to comment on council member announcements.
And giving folks just a few moments, but I'm not seeing any raised hands. Oh, here we go. We've got one. One moment. Let me go ahead and share our timer slide. Sorry, I'm having a quick technical difficulty here. All right, there we go. Are you able to see that?
Yeah.
And this is for Lori. You should now be able to unmute yourself, and you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. It just dawned on me that we have very little time to set up an altar for the Day of the Dead. That perhaps, I don't know what we'd have to go through for setting up any other place other than Jack London Village. And since Jim Shear had already set one up there, maybe that would be the best route to go this year. Then next year, maybe we could figure out if we wanted to move it to another place. If we decided to just go ahead with Jack London Village at this time, I could get on email that information out to the projects committee team, and we could get a start on it right away. I just wanted to get your feeling and feedback on that idea.
Thank you, Lori. I have no problem with that. I think I'm inclined to say that if council members Morgan and Handren are good with that, then you guys just take it. I don't think we need to have a big discussion about it.
I'm great with it.
Thumbs up. Okay. So yeah. So
Yeah, I'm me as
you guys
well.
go for it. Yeah, we're not gonna. I think like you said, there's not much time, so whatever's easiest is probably the best right now. Okay, I think we have one last item, which is consideration of items for future agenda. So next month, of course, we're going to be talking about the alternatives for the Developmental Center in a joint session. That sounds so official, a joint session with the SVCAC and the Springs MAC. But we can look beyond that to December of next year for things we might want to. And bike path is on there, of course, and that's just kind of pushed off and just assume that it will be happen. I mean, I'll keep it on the radar. No worries about that. Anything else we want to think about for a future agenda? Yeah, Councilmember Dickey.
I don't know if it's for consideration for an agenda item, but has anybody else thought about the fact that when SDC is developed, the population of Glen Ellen is going to more than double, quite likely. And I'm wondering, is there a plan for SDC becoming part of Glen Ellen? Is it going to be its own standalone entity as Eldridge? I know that there's been talk about the southern part of Glen Ellen where Kate lives, feeling segregated from the other parts of Glen Ellen. And I'm wondering if anybody else has thought about that, and wondering not if we should consider trying to incorporate as a town, because all of these issues that we're discussing, whether it's traffic or sewer or water or creek restoration, are pretty vast community-driven questions. And being broken into these little component parts that are run by Sonoma County seems to not work once a community gets to a certain size.
So thanks, Councilmember Dickey. I think we can't really get into a discussion on that right now, but I think we could have an agenda item to talk about governance, future governance of this area. I mean, it may even be part of what we're talking about next month, but I think it'd be worthy. We did explore that at the forum, but of course we're looking at it, more distantly in the future. What do we want? I think that would be a good agenda item. Any other thoughts on future agendas? Assuming that the ad hocs are dissolved at some point in the not too distant future, then we'll want to think about what are our next priorities that would require an ad hoc. So that might be that could be I think a good portion of a meeting would be just talking about that and deciding what ad hocs we want to create. But we're not quite there yet, but I think probably by early next year we're going to need to do that. Yeah, Councilmember Eagles.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Chair Arthur, because some of these to me seem like standing committees, but that's not how the rules work. And I know Hannah's going to check into this a little bit more thoroughly. For example, communications and even traffic and safety and fire. I feel like, well, how can we not have those? But that's not really my decision to make, but it's going to be an interesting discussion about, do we just create other versions of those, or, do we really look for other topics? We can think about that more, but I definitely think that will be an agenda item.
Thanks, Councilmember Eagles. I mean, we could discuss, we could turn these into standing committees. I mean, I wouldn't be against that, or we could possibly immediately before the MAC meeting so that it's only an hour. So, I mean, it would make a longer night, but it would all be grouped together. I don't know. We'll talk with Hannah about it, but I think that's a good, because I agree. These all seem like they're really important and they're long-term issues that we're going to be dealing with forever, pretty much. Any other ideas for future agendas? All right. Any ideas from the public on future agendas?
And I'm not seeing any raised hands.
All right. It looks like we're finished. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I have a second. All right. All in favor of adjourning the North Sonoma Valley Municipal Advisory Council meeting, raise your hand. All right. So adjourned at 7:20 p.m.
Good night,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Good
Good
night.
night.
All right.
Good night.